Yeah, I think this is fine. Hare Krishna.
Krishna.
Om Kyantimandasya Gyananjarashalakaya Chakshunmalitandana Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Marupisam Vistapanam Navutali Swayam Rupakaranayam Dadati Swabhaktikam Namah Vishnuvaragya Vissavutali Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swamiti Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pachayine Nivishesha Shunyavari Prasajana Satarine Vanchakapati Vishya Kripa Sanivevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Bhavanityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasadi Gaur Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. How do we do it with the language? Do some people need translation?
മലയാളം ട്രാൻസ്ലേഷൻ ആവശ്യമുള്ള ആരെങ്കിലും ഉണ്ടോ? മലയാളം.
There's one lady here. So you will sit somewhere in the corner?
Back.
Actually, without a fan, maybe mosquitoes will come in, is it? No? Well, put it on a little bit. Yes, just to keep mosquitoes away. Okay, so thank you so much for coming tonight to the last program I'll be conducting here. Even on a working day, so many people are coming, so this is very encouraging. Huh? For the recording, I have to wear that. Okay. Never seen such a thing before. Usually they clip it on here or on here, but it's like a garland of the... Let me take this one off and put that one on. Okay. It's not too far away. Looks like earplugs. Yeah, so tonight we will have the topic Meeting Death with Joy, which is the subtitle of one of my books. I find death a very fascinating topic. Actually, when I worked in medical profession and I didn't know anything about Krishna consciousness, this was one of the main questions that really intrigued me. What is actually happening at that moment? Because when you work in medical fields, quite a few times I saw people dying right in front of me. And I was always wondering what's happening there and what is happening afterwards. But nobody could give me an answer. And only when I met the devotees in Australia and I started reading Bhagavad Gita 2nd chapter. So that's where I found all the answers and I thought, wow, this is what I was looking for. It immediately convinced me. Yeah. So yeah, we can say death is the only thing which is 100% sure in life. Right? Everything else, maybe it will happen, maybe it will not happen, we don't know. But death, 100% it will happen. Yes. And yet we like to keep ourselves in this illusion that it will never happen to us. Yes. We are very expert in sweeping that topic under the carpet. You know? Yeah. And then when death is knocking on our door, so unexpectedly, what is this unexpectedly? It has to be expected at any time, actually. Yes. But this is how much we are in illusion. You know? Even Yamaraj was asking Yudhishthira Maharaj, what is the most amazing thing in this world? So Yudhishthira Maharaj exactly gave that answer. That even though we are surrounded by death, you know, every day people are dying, or when we go for a walk in nature, we see dead insects, dead birds, and so we are surrounded by death actually. But still, those who stay behind, they think it will never happen to them. That is really the most amazing thing. And you would think if something is 100% sure, any intelligent person would inquire. Right? If it's 100% sure, if it's inevitable, any intelligent person should inquire what is happening there and what is happening afterwards, and maybe we can have some influence, you know, on our next destination. These questions should be on the mind of any intelligent person, you know. But yet people don't like to talk about it. Sometimes even when I visit communities and it's on the list of my topics, and sometimes people, no, not that, no, you know. But yeah, that's how, you know, we are in illusion. We don't want to talk about it. We don't want to confront ourselves about it, do that, you know. And of course there's so much fear there also. And fear is always a sign of ignorance. So if we are ignorant, then naturally there's so much fear there. But we will see that as we actually confront ourselves with this topic, then we lose our fear. We realize it's actually not such a horrifying thing. We have done it so many times already. We just don't remember. You know? Yes. It is not so horrifying. Yeah, so we make so many arrangements how to live nicely. But actually we should make arrangements how to die nicely. And if we make arrangements how to die nicely, then we don't only die nicely, we also live nicely, because that's Krishna consciousness. Yeah. Actually, the whole process of bhakti is like a preparation to meet this moment in a glorious way. Getting out of here, going back to God. You know? Yeah. That's what Krishna consciousness is all about. And also interesting to see how a devotee and a non-devotee, they have very different attitudes towards death. For a non-devotee, it is the most unwanted, most horrifying moment, which, yeah, should be delayed as much as possible, you know? But then for a devotee, it is a different thing. It's actually a very glorious moment. Finally, that opportunity comes where we can get on the plane back home, back together, join Krishna in his divine abode. He's been waiting for us for so many lifetimes. So why delaying? You know? When the time comes, why hanging on to this world, wanting to stay here for a little longer? You know? It shows that our relationship with Krishna has not been so deeply developed. Because as we develop our relationship with Krishna through deep chanting, yesterday we had a chanting session, in the city center. So if we actually really chant deeply, mindfully turning to Krishna, feelingly calling out to Him, longing for the relationship, so that will develop our relationship with Krishna. And as our relationship tangibly develops and becomes more reality, we actually lose proportionally, we lose our fear of death. So just the fact that we are fearful means our relationship with Krishna is very fragile, right? Hardly developed at all, actually. Yeah, that's what it means. And I mean, we know in Bhagavad Gita 8.5, Antakare Chaman Vivasman Muktva. So Krishna tells us, if you remember me alone, then you will reach my abode of this, there's no doubt. So Krishna says me alone. He doesn't say me and your husband, your wife, your daughter, granddaughter, cat, dog, whatever people have. No, it's Krishna alone. And that is not so easy. To remember Krishna alone requires serious preparation. Basically, we can understand that the moment of death, we are tested. Which relationship is most important to us? Is it our relationship with Krishna? Or are there any other relationships which are more important to us? Is there any personality in our life which is more important than Krishna? So, if there is anybody who is more important than Krishna, we have to come back. Definitely. We have to come back and do this more, finish this more important business. Yeah. So that's basically what death is all about. We are tested. Which relationship is most important? And yeah, family relationships are very deep, especially between mother and child. Such a deep bond there. That's why the Vanapasa ashram is so important, actually. Yes. That's why Prabhupada says we should not remain in family life until the moment of death. It's spiritual suicide, Prabhupada says. Yes. All these statements are in the Bhagavatam. There's another statement where he says, no gentleman will stay in family life until the moment of death. Yeah. Because if we remain surrounded by our family members, almost impossible to remember Krishna alone. Almost impossible. Yeah. We may remember our granddaughter and we are lamenting, or I didn't see her getting married. What a shame. Oh, well, then we maybe have to come back just to see that, how the granddaughter gets married. And I'm not quite sure if it's worthwhile. So this, for many devotees, this is not so clear, actually, these things. And I mean, saying that the family relationships are very deep does not mean better not to get married. Does not mean that. Because it's interesting to understand that complete renunciation and detachment is based on attachment. Then it is complete. In other words, a poor person who has no money in the pocket to enjoy life, for for him very easy to say, oh, I'm renounced, because he doesn't have any money anyway to enjoy. You know? But if he has money, and he consciously makes that decision not to enjoy sense gratification, that is complete detachment. You know? And I have also observed this, you know, I'm preaching a lot also in poor countries. Before the war started, I spent a lot of time in Ukraine. Ukraine people live very simple, very simple. Oh my God, you cannot even imagine. Very simple. And Bangladesh also lower standard of life than India. And I have seen many times that devotees, when they are in that more simple environment, they may be very strong devotees. But then when they move to America, they get completely overwhelmed with material desires. And sometimes they give up Krishna consciousness completely, because now they have all these opportunities to enjoy. You know? So their renunciation, detachment in the poor environment was not deep, not complete. You know? But if a person has that opportunity to enjoy, and he really uproots it, he burns out these seeds for the desire to enjoy, that is true and complete detachment. So in the same way, family life gives this opportunity to really burn out these seeds for the desire to enjoy this man-woman relationship, and you know. So it is a very purifying journey if we create our family life as an ashram, as a place really for cultivating bhakti, as I mentioned already a few times. Many devotees' family life, you cannot really call it an ashram. And then we may not get that purification, you know, to actually move on to the next ashram, the manifest ashram. Yeah, so it's a whole big topic, you know. But yeah, which relationship is most important to us? That's what we are tested at the moment of death. So let us remember what actually happens at the moment. So as we know, the soul is covered by the gross body, made from earth, water, fire, air, ether. And then there's the subtle body made from mind, intelligence, voice, ego. So, and at the moment of death, the soul simply leaves behind this dead, gross shell of the gross body, and on the subtle body of mind, intelligence, voice, ego, the soul moves to the next destination. That's what happens. It's like a mysterious transformation, you know. Yeah, not so horrifying, really. We can see it as a journey into another service situation. Because I think of that we can be sure that if we spend most of this lifetime serving Krishna, serving the devotees, chanting the holy name, at least to some extent more or less attentive, whatever, you know, then we will continue in our next life where we left off. That's what Prabhupada says. If we don't make it back to God in this life, we will again take birth in a devotee family and we will continue from there. You know? Yes. So that's already good news. At least we don't lose whatever little advancement we have made. Krishna is so kind, he allows us to keep that. If we would start every time with zero, this would be a big challenge, then we would never make it. But like that, we, lifetime after lifetime, we can gradually get there. And I dare say, for most people, it is a journey over several lifetimes. Because depending how the subtle body of mind, intelligence, false ego is composed, what kind of attachments and desires and impressions and experiences are in that subtle body stored there, and of course also depending on what activities we performed, what kind of karmic reactions we get. So that determines our next destination. And we can only get out of this material world if the subtle body of mind, intelligence, false ego is completely spiritualized and transformed. That all the material impressions, desires, experiences, attachments, they are replaced with spiritual desires and impressions and experiences. So that requires quite a lot of internal work, right? Yeah, the subtle body of mind, intelligence, false ego has to be completely transformed. And we can see the process of Krishna consciousness is really targeting the subtle body, actually. That's why Krishna always says, fix your mind on me, always remember me, never forget me. So that all targets the subtle body. That's why it is so important to, go on parikrama, come to Mātā, Vrindavan, holy places, to really, invite so many strong spiritual impressions into our subtle body, and that will remove all the material impressions more and more. There will be more and more in the distance, and when we seriously practice. I mean, when I think back of my non-devotee life more than 40 years ago, my God, this is so far away from me, it's like previous lifetime or something, Yes, because we, growing up in Europe, our lifestyle is pretty different than from the Krishna conscious lifestyle. For you here in India, it may not be such a drastic difference, but for us European people, oh my God, it's completely different lifestyle, Yeah, so in all these material activities and impressions, they're pretty far away, thank God. So if they're far away, that means we have done already at least some little transformational work. Yes, so I mean we have these nice analogies in Bhagavad Gita, that we leave. We give up old and useless clothes and we accept a new set. That's a very relatable analogy. So we all have that experience. We may wear a pair of pants or some skirt or whatever. And then at a certain point we realize this is worn out. Let's chuck it out. Let's get a new one. Or when we drive a vehicle, So the body is like the vehicle for the soul. So alright, it's our duty to nicely care for the vehicle, fix it regularly, service it. But then at a certain point, this breaks down, that breaks down, another thing breaks down, and it just becomes too troublesome to maintain it. So then, alright, let's get rid of it, let's get a new one. So that's really what it is, So whenever the body is getting old and useless, or useless through some incident, accident, whatever, so then, alright, time for the soul to get out. And even in nature we have similar experiences. like when the caterpillar transforms into a butterfly, right? He leaves this dead and dry, empty caterpillar shell behind and flies off as a colorful butterfly. So that's basically what happens at the moment of death. Yeah. And of course, only because we are so attached to this body, that's the root cause of our fears and wanting to stay here and Yes. So let me maybe share a little story, not from the Shastra, but from modern life in ISKCON, which illustrates this whole transmigration of the soul. Have you heard the story of Rāgava? No, story has not reached Kerala yet. So, when Prabhupada was in this world, he had a disciple called Rāgava. He lived in London, he had British body, brahmachari. During the week he used to go out on book distribution and Harinam, and on the weekend he came back to the temple and was serving in the kitchen. So one day it so happened that on the way back to the temple they had a car accident and Rāgava left his body. So the devotees were a little disturbed, sending a message to Prabhupada, Rāgava left his body. And Prabhupada, of course, he had the spiritual vision, he didn't get bewildered and disturbed. So he simply said, yes, please conduct some commemoration program for him, and he will continue in his next life. That's what Prabhupada said. That letter you can still find in the database. Yeah. So, and this is exactly what had happened. So the soul who was in Rāgavadasa's body took birth in an Indian Mataji's body, also in London. Her name is Ratnavali Devi Dāsī. She is an initiated disciple of His Holiness Bhakti True Swami Maharaj. So she took birth in a devotee family, and from young age she was very attracted to Krishna consciousness and through astrology you can prove that this is the same spirit soul. Don't ask me how, I'm not an astrologer, but yeah. And also Ratnavali Mataji, sometimes in dreams, she sees all kinds of experiences which she had as Rāgava. Yeah. So we may also have that in dreams the same things come up. So when we dream the same thing again and again, this may very well indicate some previous activities and experiences in previous life. And also in London, why don't you come inside? There's somebody sitting there. Why are you hiding? You're embarrassed to come late or what? Okay, thank you for coming. Yeah, so, and also in London there is one devotee who knows the art of putting people under hypnosis. And under hypnosis, you can remember your previous life, regression we call it. So Ratnavali Mataji did this, and she remembered so many things there when she was in Rāgavadasa's body. So it is a pretty well-established fact in ISKCON that Ratnavali Mataji was Rāgava in her previous life. And also in Bhaktivedanta Manor, there's still many Prabhupada disciples there who knew Rāgava. Actually, on one visit, I spoke to the driver who had the accident. He didn't leave his body in the car accident. He is still around. So I had a whole talk to him about this. So yeah, there's still many devotees there who knew Raghava very well. So when Ratnavali Mataji meets them, she has this feeling, oh, we know each other. Yeah. So we may also have that experience, that we meet somebody and we have that feeling, wow, we immediately connect, we know each other. So that can very easily be from previous life. So now, when His Holiness Bhakti Swami was still with us in this world, when he heard the first time the story, which is quite a few years ago, maybe 20 years ago or something, he was asking Ratnavali Mataji one question. What do you think? What would be the most obvious thing to ask? Any suggestions from your side? Well, I'm drinking a sip of water. What would be the most obvious thing to ask? Huh?
What would be the experience of leaving the body?
Not quite. A little bit more precise. I mean, that we could ask anybody, what was your experience of leaving this body? But now, what did he ask? What's the most obvious thing to ask?
What was he occupied with?
Huh?
During the time of death, what was he commonly thinking?
Yes. What the hell happened? Before you were in a British brahmachari body, now you're in Indian Mataji's body. How did that happen? What did you think at the moment of death? Right? Most obvious thing to ask. How did that happen? So, and Ratnavali Mataji, she was researching this topic a little bit. She asked different devotees who knew Raghava. And then they remembered, oh yes, during the week he was on book distribution and Harinam, and on the weekend he came back to the temple, served in the kitchen, and there was an Indian Mataji there serving in the kitchen. So now you're laughing, you think, oh, he must have had some love affair with her or something. But now, Raghava was a very strict brahmachari. He didn't allow himself to be attracted by women. It was the opposite. They were quarreling always a little bit. They didn't like each other. There was some tension between them. And that was enough for Raghava to come back in an Indian Mataji's body. Oh, yes. See, that's one point we often neglect. We don't remember that not only the attractions bind us to this world, but the aversions and dislikes also. Yes, we have the saying, attraction and aversion are the two sides of the same coin. And in Bhagavad Gita, also Krishna says we have to overcome the aversions and Yeah, but often we only think of the attractions, And to be averse means, aversion is also based on a certain kind of attachment, the attachment of being averse. It's also a material attachment, right? Yes. Aversions also occupy some mundane space there, some space in the mundane mind. With aversions we can't enter Goloka Vrindavan, sorry. They all have to be worked through and given up. Yeah. So that's a pretty good lesson, And at least in the Western world I have observed that talking about brahmacharis, very often they can only remain brahmachari when they develop some aversion towards women. These women are all in Maya and they're all foolish and they're all lusty, and, you know. So, guaranteed woman's body in our next life. Good to know, you know. Yeah, so in any case, this is what happened, you know. And now couple more interesting things. Ratnavali took birth with some birthmarks. She has a birthmark on the forehead and one across the belly. So when I was working in my medical profession, for some time I was working with early born babies. And I was treating them through reflexes to enhance their development, you know, it's a whole science. So, and I remember one day I was standing there in the hospital, I had this box full of babies in front of me who were lined up in some box, and I saw one of them had a birthmark. And I asked some senior professor, I was always inquisitive, I was always thinking, you know, why is this, why is that? It can't be coincidence, there must be some reason. So I asked the senior professor, who was also in the room there, I asked him, so why is this baby having birthmarks and the other babies don't? And his answer was, babies have these things, nobody knows. That was his answer. But we can give a better answer. So where do the birthmarks come from? Any suggestion? Any suggestion? Yes, the injuries. Actually, Raghava exactly had his injuries where Ratnavali Mataji has the birthmarks. Exactly. Yeah. Actually, I included this whole story in the book about death. And I sent the story to Ratnavali Mataji just to look through it if I'm telling it properly. So I've been in contact with her. I never met her, but we have been corresponding. And she has the post-mortem, we call it, that death report. You know? She was saying, oh, you want to include the death report? There it's written where the injuries are. I said to her, it's all right, no need, no need. You know? But she has it all, black and white. You know, where Raghava's injuries were, exactly where she has her birthmarks. So, and very clear, when we leave our body through a traumatic impact, then there are these impressions in the mind. Oh, my head, oh, my belly. And these impressions are there in the subtle body. And the subtle body takes the soul to the next destination. And already in the room of our next mother, you know, the mind is still contemplating or my head or my belly. And that leads to the birthmarks. Already child in the womb develops them through that, you know, meditation on these traumatic impacts. That's quite amazing, isn't it? That's like a medical proof. How the soul transmigrates. Yes, yeah, medical proof. Yeah, so quite interesting. And then also I saw some pictures. I saw a picture of Raghava, and I saw a picture of Ratnavali Mataji, and I saw a picture of this Indian Mataji who served in the kitchen. By the way, Ratnavali Mataji was also visiting this Mataji who served in the kitchen. I don't know much about that meeting, but it must have been a pretty unusual meeting. You know, you imagine you're meeting the person who you had some aversion to in your previous life, and that's why you're back here again. Interesting. So in any case, when I looked at the pictures, I couldn't help myself laughing. So why did I laugh? Huh? Some connection? Well, yeah, they looked similar. You could see Ratnavali Mataji has some aspects of Raghava's facial features, but then also some of the Zinja Mataji. My God, you could really see it, you know. So, why does Ratnavali Mataji also has features from her face as Raghava? Why are they also there? Anybody can explain that? Why does Ratnavali Mataji have some facial features of Raghava? What do you think?
He might have thought of her.
No, she was him. So the soul that was in Ratnavali's body is now was in Raghava's. So why does Ratnavali Mataji have some facial features of her previous body? Attachment, exactly. Because we are so attached to our face, right? More than any other part of the body. Yes, we identify with the face. So many times we look in the mirror every day, oh yes, I'm very beautiful, very handsome, or I'm getting old, or I'm putting on weight, getting fat. You know, so we look all the time, you know, oh my tilak, very beautiful. You know, so we don't identify with any other part of the body more than with the face. The feet, we don't worry about the feet so much, you know. But the face, oh, you know, yes. So we are all attached to our facial features. So that's why Ratnavali Mataji has some aspects of her previous body as Raghava, but then some aspects of this Mataji who he was averse to. That's how it works. You know, so whatever facial features we have here, this is no coincidence. That's a mixture. There's some elements of our previous life there, you know, the facial features, and then some of somebody who we were attracted or attached or averse to. So, well, that also explains why sometimes a child really looks like the parents. Of course, the mundane explanation is the genetical thing, but no, that's nonsense. It's not genetical. If it was genetical, then every child would look like the parents, but some children do, some children don't. Right? Yes. So, it goes back to a previous life, you know, when a child looks like the father or the mother, then most likely they had some attachment or aversion in their previous life, you know. And well, because the family relationships and attachments are so deep, that's why it often happens that we take birth again in the same family, you know. Yeah, so interesting. Yeah. So now one thing, we don't have so much time left, it's a big topic. There's so many nice things to share, right? But one thing is, let us be clear. to remember Krishna is actually not in our control completely. You know, we have the verse Sarvasya Chamriti Sanivisto, Mātā smriti jnana mukunam cha. So there Krishna says, from me comes knowledge, remembrance, forgetfulness. So actually, remembrance, the power to remember Krishna, is actually coming from Krishna. He has to be so merciful to appear on the level of our mind. We can only try and develop our relationship with Him, but then if we seriously develop that relationship, that will attract Him, so He will appear in our mind. I remember when I just had moved into the temple in Sydney in Australia, I was in Krishna consciousness for 6 months or something. I'd had to get some little surgery done, just some minor harmless thing, but I needed full anesthesia. And I had heard already that we have to remember Krishna at the moment of death. So I thought, all right, let me try to remember Krishna just at that moment when I fall asleep. But then I was shocked to realize when I woke up that I didn't remember Krishna. And I was thinking, oh, not so easy to remember Krishna if I can't even remember Him at such a harmless little surgery there. What to speak of death? That's a bit more bewildering, and yeah. So that was my first realization, not so easy to remember Krishna. And then I know another example of one Mataji in Ukraine. And before the war I met her many times there. And she has been seriously practicing for at least 25, 30 years. So, and some years ago she had a stroke. And she was paralyzed on the right side, which means the left side of the brain is damaged, which means speech and memory are gone. Right, that's where speech and memory sits here on the left side. So it was completely gone. She couldn't remember anything. Not a single word of her language, not even her own name, absolutely nothing. Yeah, like a deleted computer program, it was gone. So, but then brain has a good capacity to recover. So, and then when she got it all back, memory, speech, everything came back. So then, and when I met her, I asked her, so what was it like? It must have been quite bewildering. Imagine you cannot remember a single word of your language, you don't even know your own name, absolutely nothing. So, and she gave an interesting answer. She said, yeah, it was a little unusual, but one thing I remembered, the Maha Mantra. And I just chanted the Maha Mantra in my mind, and I knew I would be okay. So now that is really a miracle from medical point of view. You know, that cannot be explained. How a person doesn't even remember their own name, but then they remember the whole Maha Mantra. Wow, amazing. So that's how Krishna appears when the devotee has seriously practiced. You know? Yeah, quite amazing. And there's a similar story also. Mother Isha, she was a Prabhupada disciple. She also had a stroke. Right side paralyzed, speech, memory was gone. And because she was a little elderly, she didn't get these functions back. But she had same thing. She simply remembered the Maha Mantra. That's all she remembered for the rest of her life. And unfortunately, she had to be admitted to some non-devotee nursing home there to take care of her. Because in America, well, that's the culture. Nobody has time to care for anybody. Everybody is busy with themselves. So, but she was the whole day, from morning to evening, singing the Maha Mantra through the whole establishment there. You know? Actually, Narendra Swami shares this story because he knew Mother Isha very well, and he was very upset that she ended up in some non-devotee nursing home. So that one day he actually made that effort to visit her. Some of his disciples were driving him there for 3-4 hours just to visit her. But then when he came there, she didn't remember him. You know, he was saying, oh, it's Naranjan, you remember I was there in Boston Temple when you were there. She couldn't recognize him. All she was doing was chanting the holy name. So at first Maharaj was a little disappointed. He had traveled all the way just to visit her. But then he concluded, actually, whether she remembers me or not, it doesn't matter. Main thing is she remembers the Maha Mantra. That's the main thing. Yeah, so, and then one day she left her body there. You know. But for the rest of her life, all she did was chant the holy name. And we may be thinking, oh, how terrible, what a calamity if she doesn't remember anything. But from a spiritual point of view, one can say that's Krishna's blessing. All the nonsense is deleted. All she remembers is the Maha Mantra. You know, that's a blessing actually. Yes. So often things that look like a big calamity actually can be turned around in a golden opportunity and a great blessing to remember Krishna more. Well, 8:25. Shall I stop here or shall I tell one more interesting thing? One more interesting thing. Because many people say, I'm not so afraid of dying, I'm afraid of the pain that comes along with dying, right? So now an interesting point is that pain is experienced on the level of the mind. It's got nothing to do with the level of the soul. It is simply an experience on the level of the mind. And the mind works in such a way that when the mind is strongly focused on something else, we can actually overcome the level of pain. I'll share a little episode from my youth, which was quite a while ago. So when I was a teenager, I was playing in a handball team. That was long before Krishna consciousness. And I was the goalkeeper, because I'm pretty tall. So, and we had one match which was not just training, but we actually played against another city. So it was, for us youngsters, it was pretty exciting. And in that match, I broke my little finger. It's still got some funny lump out there. And I really broke it. I could feel it cracking. Oh my God. Actually, it stood off to the side. Yeah. But because I had gloves on, I didn't see it. And because my mind was so focused on winning the match, which we did, that I continued playing with this finger for about 20 minutes. And I did not feel any pain whatsoever, nothing. Because the mind was fully focused. And only after the game was over and I took my gloves on and, oh my God, I saw that finger. it was all swollen, blue, standing off to the side, you know. That's when the pain hit. So painful, you know. Yeah. So that's how the mind works, you know. And there's also stories, let's say a mother and child gets injured and the mother's mind is focused, I have to save my child. You know, she can develop enormous powers and strength just to save her child. Even if she's injured, she will not feel anything because she's fully focused on saving her child. So it's a well-known fact. This is how the mind works, you know. So, and at the moment of death, we are tested not only which relationship is most dear to us, but how much can we focus our mind on Krishna? And then we overcome the level of pain. Yeah, that's what it's all about. So rather than taking painkillers or morphine, this morphine is not a good idea to take when we're about to leave. I've accompanied quite a few devotees and my own parents also. I know of a few devotees who took morphine. This made their departure so troublesome because morphine is actually a drug and it makes you feel, it gives you that illusory sense of happiness. Yeah? Yes. And that Mataji I accompanied last year, you know, she took this heavy dose of morphine for 2-3 months. And she, at some stage, she leaned back and she was saying, this feels so good. This could go on forever. You know, that's what the morphine does, that we start enjoying the whole situation. And then we can't let go. We want to stay. Yes. Then, you know, Krishna has to boot us out. You know, whole body shuts down. Not such a glorious departure then. Yeah. So no morphine. Yes. But yeah, if we focus our mind on remembering Krishna, we can overcome the level of pain. And His Holiness Bhakti Tirtha Swami. Any of you have met him? You have met him, okay. Good. Yes. Yeah, I used to meet him in Ukraine. He used to come to the big festival there. Oh, yeah. Oh, okay. Yasapuja and Mātā, yes. Yeah, so His Holiness Bhakti Tirtha Swami, can't remember which year he left his body. But 2005, was it? Yeah. So he set an amazing example. He set an amazing example demonstrating how our absorption in Krishna, how we can overcome the level of pain. Because the last 6 weeks of his life, His Holiness Ramaswamy, he spent with him in Gitanagari in America. And he gave a very amazing 5-hour Sunday feast lecture. Anybody listen to that? You listen to it, yeah. You can find it somewhere on the internet. It's worthwhile listening to. Where he shares all these experiences he had because he was, you know, spending the last 6 weeks with him fully. He cancelled all his traveling, preaching, everything. And he's sharing how they were deeply absorbed, reading Chaitanya Charitamrita, you know, just the two of them, or maybe 1-2 people, not big crowd, nothing. It was a very small, intimate circle of associates and caregivers, you know. And then in the evenings they had some amazing kirtans. And at some stage, Maharaj was exclaiming, life cannot be better than this. We are not reading Chaitanya Charitamrita, we are entering Chaitanya Charitamrita. And he was saying, I would not want to exchange my present situation for any other situation in this world. He was so blissful, you know? Yes, so blissful. Even though his body was in a terrible condition. You know, one leg was already amputated. He had the whole spine, all the bones full of cancer. I mean, from a material point of view, he must have been so much in pain. The doctors were shocked. How is it possible that a person in such a condition can be so blissful? You know? Yeah. And there is a statement, I believe it's Chaitanya Charitamrita somewhere, where it says, a perfect devotee, if he faces apparent suffering, for him it is not suffering, it's bliss. Why? Because as a devotee we take these seemingly suffering conditions, we take them as an opportunity to more deeply take shelter of Krishna. And then Krishna responds. He shows himself more tangibly to that devotee, and then he becomes blissful. Yeah. So Maharaj really demonstrated this, you know? Yes. How we can overcome the level of pain. But we need association, that's the thing. By ourselves, difficult. And all our life, we need good association, and especially in this last phase, we have to plan, we have to, you know, make some considerations, and you know, of course we never know how we will leave, but still we have to plan. And then let's see if Krishna accepts our plan, or if he has a different plan. I mean, I'm considering, I'm planning. I have already a list of people who I asked, oh, would you be willing to be with me in this last phase? Yes. We have to think a little ahead, you know. Yeah. And I mean, one thing, I hope this will not be too bewildering and disappointing for you. From a spiritual point of view, it's actually not so good to be taken care of by family members. Because, you know, if your son, grandchildren are around you, they're caring for you, makes it pretty hard to remember Krishna alone. And there is one statement where Prabhupada says, a glorious death is when the relatives don't even know we are leaving. That's a glorious death. Not when they're all sitting around our bedside. That's not a glorious death. Sometimes I read these announcements, or such and such Prabhu, disciple of Prabhupada, peacefully left this world surrounded by family members. When I read this, I think, oh no, what a disaster. Yes, because these family attachments so deep. So for the last 2 or 3 weeks, the family members should be invisible in the background, no more. Yes, we have to give space to the person to detach themselves and go, you know. Yeah, so better to be cared for by other devotees, not the family members. You know, they can be there before, depending on what kind of death we have, whether we have some time to prepare or whether it comes suddenly. You know. So there's a time when the family members can come and associate and do some service, but then the last 2 or 3 weeks, no more. You know. Yeah, so this is something that we usually don't so much consider, right? Of course, if the family members are not devotees, like my parents were not devotees, so then it's beneficial if a devotee is there, you know, even if it's the family members. then it's beneficial. Because their attachment to the family member, if that person is a devotee, then that person can guide them better, you know? Yes. But if we are devotees, then better not to be surrounded by family people. Yes. And I've also observed this many times, that when your dearmost people are sitting right next to the bed of a dying person, how can you leave? You can't. I've seen it many times. You can't leave. Even when Guru sits there, how can you leave when your Guru Maharaj sits at your bedside? Impossible, you know? And then when they come to a point when they get tired, you know, and they go and take rest or they eat something, then the person leaves. Okay. Happens many times. But while people are sitting there, very difficult to leave, especially family members. You know. Also, you may know, not long ago, His Holiness Kadambakana Swami left his body. Who met him personally? Anybody had his association? Few people, yeah. Yeah, so he at a certain stage, he said, no more ladies around me. And I thought, okay, I will take that into my list. No more men around me. Good idea. Yeah, because this man-woman attraction is so deep, especially family members. Oh, you know, but even if they're not family members, better not to have persons from the other gender around you. Yes. All these things we often don't think about, you know? So we need a bit of training, we need some knowledge, what is good and helpful and what better not to do, you know? And another important thing is also to remember that fasting is a very dignified and glorious way to live, you know? Yes. Of course not when we are healthy, then it's suicide. But you know, but when it's getting obvious, the body is falling apart, the body doesn't even want anything anymore, fasting from food and water, 4 or 5 days, you're gone. My mother did that. She was so determined. She already always told me previously, if my time comes, I will fast. Because she had a friend in her village, she did it like that. She just fasted when it was obvious it's going to an end. She stopped eating and drinking, and after 3, 4, 5 days, you're gone. So that really speeds up the whole process. So, and I was with my mother too when she left. And it was, she was 92, she always wanted to leave, and so, and it became obvious. So she asked me, she said, I'm going to fast, and you're going to have to help me to pull this through. So don't give me anything. Even if I ask for it, don't give me anything. You have to help me with this. She was so determined. And that's how she did it. She stopped eating and drinking, and she had a very glorious departure, fully focused, no medicines, nothing. You know? Yeah. That's the way to do it. You know? It takes a bit of courage. You know? You have to really let go and say, okay, now let's get out of here. You know? Yeah. Yeah, so good to know these things, you know. Whereas, you know, all these life-extending measures that people put themselves on some drip there to get the glucose and, you know, what for, you know, what for, you know. Just extends the whole struggle and suffering. Yes, I mean, my father also, when he left, was funny. one doctor came, and my father said, "Doctor, I don't need a doctor, tell him to go." You know? And he was standing there in the door, "Well, maybe you need some medicines." My father, "Medicines? What for? I don't need medicines. Tell him to go." So he completely focused. What's this nonsense? Doctor medicines. I'm leaving my body. Get out. That was my parents. They were pretty unusual personalities. Yeah, anyway, there's so many more interesting things. But yeah, if anybody wants to hear more, please get the book. There's so many useful things in there. You know, the last book, Vanapasasha, Meeting Death with Joy. There's a whole chapter there. By the way, I had cancer 2 times, which was one of the best experiences in my life. I wouldn't want to miss it. Yes, yes. Gave me so many realizations, and I'm sharing a lot on that also in the book, you know. Yeah, so as a devotee we can turn any challenge, any calamity, we can turn it around and to make it into a golden opportunity for taking more shelter. Yeah. And I always say, you know, so many people die with cancer these days, but cancer, for me, it's a blessing. It suits me perfectly to leave this world with cancer. Because then you can prepare. You get that warning. You know, just like a Dhammakarana. Then you can exactly prepare. Okay, where do I want to leave? You visit a few more places before, like he did. He went to New York and London and Bangladesh, all these places which were dear to him, and he visited them all the last time. So then to Vrindavan, you know, you can plan it all very nicely. He also was fasting. He made that conscious decision, when I don't have the strength to sing anymore, I will fast. You know, because singing actually takes quite some power, some strength, speaking also. You know. Yeah, so, and he said, when the time comes and I can't sing, that's the time when I fast. No more food, no more water. Get out. You know. Yeah. That's how the yogis do it, you know, or the sadhus, yogis. Even the animals do it like that. The cows, you know. Interesting also to see those animals who live in herds, you know, who live in big animal families. They never die surrounded by the herd. They leave the herd. Yeah. So that's also what we should do. You know, we have to withdraw. Yeah. Otherwise, very difficult to leave. You know, of course, Prabhupada, he called everybody, you know, to make them more attached to him so the mission would go on. But usually, my experience is people don't want to have all these people around them anymore. They don't want, you know? Yeah, they want to withdraw and get out, you know? It's something everybody has to do alone, actually. All this holding hands and all that. No need. Give them space, you know, to withdraw and leave, you know. So I described so many things there. There's a whole list of things what to consider. So it's useful, you know, because parents leave, or if we are young, grandparents leave, senior devotees leave. We have to know how to give support, you know, maximum support to really help the person to remember Krishna alone, you know. Yeah. All right, do we have a quick question? 10 to 9. It's getting late. Any quick question? Yes.
Krishnaji. as your guys mentioned, like complete renunciation happens only when we experience material desires. So at the same time, we see that in ISKCON sometimes they promote Gurukuls also for children. So when they are trained in Gurukul, then they won't have any material desires. They don't see the other part of the material world. So how to understand in that case?
So the question is, I was making the point that complete renunciation and detachment should be based on having had at least the opportunity to enjoy it, not forced. You know, that's the point. It doesn't mean we have to fully dive into the sense gratification, but we should have a conscious choice, you know. So, in Gurukul, well, we get the training, you know, so we develop good habits, we get a taste. But still, later on in life, most people do get married. Only very few special souls actually stay brahmachari for their whole life. Not so many. So, and that's what Grihastha Ashram is all about. That Krishna gives us this frame, you know, of fulfilling some of our material needs and desires and so on. But at the same time, there is this nice analogy in the Bhagavatam, where it says that like a farmer, when he plows the field, he turns the soil upside down. So, and sometimes the seeds of the weeds come to the surface. And unless these seeds are completely burned out, they will sprout again. Yeah. So, and that's what it's like. These seeds for sense gratification, they have to be burned out. Just suppressing will not do the job. They have to actually be burned out. And in that same purport where Prabhupada shares this analogy, Prabhupada says, so to burn out the seeds is by intense practice of Krishna consciousness in devotional service, but intensely. If we're just cruising along, and we do some little rituals there, some little puja, and that will not burn out the seeds. So that's why our family life has to be an ashram, you know? Only if it is an ashram, a place suitable for bhakti, then the seeds will be burned out. But otherwise they're sprout again. And I mean, we see it a lot, you know, that, I mean, maybe not so much here in India, but in the Western world often devotees get married a few times, you know, even when they're elderly, when they're 65 or something, they get married a third time. So, then the seeds have not been burned out, and they sprout again, you know, the seeds for material desires. So, and that means their family life before was not an ashram, and that's why still these longings and desires are still there. Seeds are not burned out, you know, like that. So, the Gurukul training helps us to burn out the seeds. That sets the foundation to our development, you know. Yeah. Shall we leave it at that, or?
Prabhu has a question, but he has some sound problem, so I will repeat the question.
Okay. Last question now, because it's getting late. You have to go to work tomorrow.
Prabhu's question was for a devotee who was not perfectly Krishna conscious, but he was practicing, and if he dies with some material desires, whether he has to go to the place of Yamaraj for judgment and then he has to take rebirth, or whether he will skip the Yamaraj's judgment.
Well, who am I to say that? I guess it depends, what kind of life he was leading, I don't really feel qualified to say that. I mean, for example, in regards to Raghava, I actually should ask Ratnavali Mataji, but I think there's about 2 years difference between Raghava leaving his body and Ratnavali Mataji appearing. So of course 9 months she was in the room, but obviously something else happened in that other year, So then again Raghava was a younger devotee. He probably did perform all kinds of sinful activities and so maybe, he had to visit a few places there in between or something. So exactly I don't know these things, and I dare say they're pretty complicated. It's not so easy to say, yes, when this happens, that will happen, and. So let's leave that up to Krishna. Let's leave that up to Krishna. I don't really know. But wherever we may go, it is in the subtle body. That's why in the hellish planets we can survive all kinds of hellish experiences, because there's no gross body. We just experience it in the subtle body, But suffering enough. So let's see. I don't know. It's quite intricate. It depends really what kind of activities we have performed and this and that and so on. All right, so maybe we'll leave it at that. So let me also bring your attention one more time to the books, just in case there's still somebody who didn't get the books they want. I mean, I have the feeling most of you may have gotten the books at Radha Swami's Vyasa Puja. But just in case there's still somebody, then please, tonight is your last chance, because then we will wrap up the whole order, and I will, we do the accounting and everything, and I will count how many books I have to send. So please don't come. Sometimes I have that, 2 hours before I'm off to the airport, and can I have a Fortigo book? So please don't leave it to the last minute. So if anybody wants to get some books, tonight is the chance, and I don't think I have to repeat again which book is about what. I think everybody knows. Or if you don't know, then you can come privately to me. But in any case, so this session gave a little bit of insight what this book about death and Manapastasham is all about. So this was just some little introduction. In the book you will find so many interesting things, and especially really how to meet death with joy, by really educating ourselves now already what this Vanapasa ashram is all about. Even if we are only 30 or 40, we still should know. We should plan, we should meditate, we should, cultivate the desire and how to actually live that last phase in life. It's a very joyful life, period of life, where we can finally do all these things in Krishna consciousness, which we couldn't do when we had small kids. So finally we can dive back, into more serious, deep, full-time Krishna consciousness. And there's such a variety how we can do this. So married life is just a phase, just for 20, 25 years, and then we are meant to move on. So that also puts a whole different picture to married life, if we realize it's just a phase we're going through, and then comes another one. And if we want to get out of here, we have to take advantage of this wonderful situation. Okay, so I want to thank you all very much for allowing me to visit you here in beautiful Sri Lanka. And it was a great pleasure for me to be here and share a few thoughts and realizations with you all and be in your company. And I was very nicely cared by Mataji, feeding me so much. And the programs were all effective, and I met different places and audiences and all that. So, yeah, I had a nice time. So thank you so much, and if anybody is interested to come to the Holy Name Retreat, there's also a poster there. And so. Thank you, Srila Prabhupada Ki, Salva Vedavakta Ki.